So today we're going to do the handover video on this T-class 655 Hymer. We're going to start on the outside and then we're going to move on to the inside. So firstly, if I come over to the driver's side and I open the driver's door, you'll notice just underneath the steering wheel you've got an adjustment for the steering wheel and the position of it, and you've also got a bonnet release catch here for the front bonnet. I'll release that for you now. Whilst we're here as well, this motorhome is fitted with cab blinds. To operate these, all you'll need to do is simply pull the plastic tab away and then slide the blind out like so until they connect up via the magnetic strip. As you can see, you've got the same for the front section of the window here, as well as the big window at the front. This simply pulls up and will connect up here, and it'll do a really good job at blacking out the entire cab. Just be quite delicate with these and take your time with them. If you pull them and force them, they could potentially break. They're quite delicate, so just bear that in mind. So with the bonnet open, the main thing that you need to know underneath here is if you're ever going to jump start the motorhome. You can see that your battery is accessible here. You've got your negative, which is at the front here, or you could connect your negative to this point here for a better connection. And your positive is just at the back. So if I remove this cap, you can see just there, you've got your positive terminal, which just can connect on as indicated by the red piece of plastic there. So that's how you jump start the motorhome. They're the main things that you need to know, but just to point out a couple more things, you've got your brake disc fluid, which is here. You've then got your engine oil, which can be accessed here, along with your dipstick just below that. You've then got your engine coolant here. And then finally, you've got your power steering fluid, which is at the front here. Moving around the side of the motorhome, you can see this motorhome has been fitted with a Hymer F45S awning. Now, I will send you a separate video showing you how that awning can be operated. As you can imagine, it's a little bit difficult to do just with the one hand. So I'll send you a separate video showing you how that can be operated and used correctly. Two main things to remember for the awning is if it is a windy day, don't use the awning. You should always take it back in that instance, because if you get any sort of wind underneath there, it could potentially rip and tear away from the vehicle, damaging your van and also other vehicles on site. So if it's a windy day, just take it back in. Also, if it's raining, although the awning can be used in rain, at some point you will need to pull that out and dry it out on a dry day, because if you store that awning in and it's wet, obviously after a long period of time that will just lead to mould and rot the awning canvas, so just bear that in mind. But as I say, I'll send you the separate video showing you how that can be done. Next up in this locker here, this is actually where your gas bottles can be stored, and as you can see, with the gas locker door open, gains you access into your gas locker. Now there's a gas regulator up here which is ready to accept a pigtail. The pigtail will connect onto here and that will then feed into your bottles. You can see you've got space for 2 bottles in here, and of course you've got your strap in here to strap them down in position for when you're travelling. Please ensure that when you're travelling your gas is turned off at the bottle. You never want to be travelling with your gas flowing through the vehicle, because of course if you are involved in a collision, it's quite dangerous. So only turn your gas on when you're stationary and you're using the motorhome. When you're travelling, leave it turned off. Next up, obviously, you've got your entrance door into the habitation area. We'll jump on there in a minute. And then just next to there, you can see that you've got your fridge vents. For your fridge vents, it will obviously, this is where all the fridge pulls all of its air from. If it is a sunny day and you've got the sun beating down on this side of the vehicle, I'd personally recommend turning the van around or perhaps pulling the awning out, just to try and leave the fridge or the fridge vents out of the line of the sun. It will just allow the fridge to run a little bit more efficiently. You can also buy winter covers for these as well, which just slot in behind the vents if you are storing the van in really cold weather. Moving towards the back of the motorhome, you can see you've got a little locker here, and in the locker here you can see that you've got a really good bit of storage. I'll just pull this out for the time being. You can see in here you've got a spare wheel and a really nice bit of storage which can be accessed as well. I'll show you more of that when we jump onto the inside of the motorhome, because you can actually access this from underneath the bed by just lifting the bed up. But we'll jump on that when we move on to the inside. Moving towards the rear of the motorhome. Sorry about that. So you can see that you've got your bike rack fitted to the rear of the motorhome. If you want me to show you how this can operate whilst we are going through the vehicle on handover, just let us know and I will show you how that can be done. It's dead easy really. You just need to pull this down. You've then got these little zip ties that then just hold onto the wheel of the bike and will allow it to connect in safely for when you're travelling. But as I say, I can go through that with you on the day. Moving around to the other side of the motorhome, you've actually got a little locker in here. This holds your cassette toilet locker. And opening this up, you can see you've got your cassette toilet. To release this, all you've got to do is pull up, as you can see, on the yellow tab and slide that cassette out towards you. Please ensure that the blade on the toilet is closed before removing the cassette, and the blade I will of course show you when we move on to the inside of the van, but that will basically allow you to open and close the cassette. If that blade is open, it will still be in contact with the cassette, so when you come to remove this it might get jammed, and it has been known that customers will then force that, which will obviously break the float system and of course the cassette itself, so just ensure that that is closed. Providing it is, slide it out just like so. And then to empty this, all you need to do is pull the funnel out like so, remove the yellow cap, click the yellow button, and that will release an internal vacuum, allowing you to empty the contents of this cassette. Now, to swill this out, stick a bit of water in there and swill it around, and then again dispose of that. And then if you're using blue fluid or green fluid, which will break down the waste in the cassette, you can use the cap. There's a little measurement in there to indicate how much you need to put in. Once you've done that, stick the cap back on, push the funnel back into position, and that cassette is ready to go back into the motorhome. You will also notice that you have got this yellow valve here. This actually turns. This makes contact with the blade on the toilet that I was telling you about, and this opens and closes the blade. Now, for the reasons I've just discussed, make sure that this is in this position. If this is off slightly and you go to pop the cassette back in, it won't go in correctly. So the easiest way of looking at it is if it came out like that rather, it needs to go in like that. So just bear that in mind. So providing that's all been done, offer that back up to the cassette locker and slide the cassette back in until you hear that click. That's now nice and solid, ready for when you're travelling. Next up, just underneath the cassette, brings us on to your first drain down point. You've got three main drain down points in the motorhome. You've got your wastewater drain down point, your freshwater drain down point, and your boiler drain down point. Now, your fresh and your waste are located on the outside. You can see your discharge pipe for your waste is here, and your handle to empty the waste is just located here. Pull that towards you to empty the waste tank. When you're on site, there'll be a big grid that you can drive over. Just line yourself up with that grid, pull that, and that will then dispose of all the waste water. It's a similar story as well for the fresh, and like I say, the fresh can be drained down here. You'll notice that you have got a blue little handle here. Pull that handle, or turn that handle rather, and that will drain down your fresh water, similar to how it does with your waste. And like I mentioned, once you're over that grid on site, drain down the majority of the water on site. And I'd personally recommend, once you've drained down the majority of the water, when you're travelling home, you can leave all your drain down points open, because the vibrations of the road will just make sure that all that water finds its way out of the van, ensuring when you come to store the van, there's no water remaining in the system, because you should always drain everything down when you're not using it, especially in the cold months, because obviously it does run the risk of freezing. Coming back up to the van as well, I did skip over this. This is a Truma vent. This is in essence the vehicle's chimney. Just give that a bit of a wide berth, it can get quite hot. And then back up to the front, you can see that you've got firstly a flap here, which if I just move around, will allow you to fill up your fresh water tank. Just use a food grade hose pipe to fill that fresh water tank up, just ensuring that there'll be no bacteria that builds up in the pipe, which could subsequently end up in the tank. And then just below here you can see we're actually plugged into 230 volt mains electric, and this is where that goes. This will charge your leisure battery, but also allow you to use anything that's 230 volt in the vehicle, such as microwaves and your 230 volt pin sockets. Okie dokie, so we're now on the inside of the motorhome, out of the rain. You can see that you've got your lounge here, which is at the front. You have got storage underneath each of your bench seats. And also in the lounge area, before I miss it and skip over it, you have got a fan heater here. Now, how this works, this is designed for when your ignition is on. If you want to heat the remainder of the motorhome, Obviously, being in the cab, it's going to struggle heating and getting all that hot air to the back. So when you're travelling, if you wanted your heater to be on in the habitation area, just turn this fan on just by setting this to the correct fan speed, just down there. And then above that is the temperature gauge as well, depending on what, how hot or how cold you want the air. And as I say, this is only designed for when you're travelling. Your main heater we'll go over shortly, but that is purely and simply for when you're travelling, just to allow the air to circulate through the van. So when you're on site and you arrive there, it's nice and warm. So coming back now, and just as I come through the habitation door, you can see that you've got your main control panel, which is just above the door. So there's a few things to go over here. So you can see firstly that you've got your 12 volt button here. Turn that off to obviously turn everything off in the motorhome. That'll turn off all your lights. It won't do these two because these are designed as your porch lights as you enter, but it'll turn pretty much everything else off in the motorhome. To turn it on, simply press that up rather. You can see that turns all your lights on and activates everything. Now as we're plugged into 230 volt electric, you'll notice that you've got a little light here that's glowing to indicate that we are plugged in. This means that the vehicle's recognising that it's pulling charge in, which will charge your leisure battery as I mentioned, and also provide you with 230 volt power. If you're not getting this lighting up and your van is plugged in, there's probably an issue with your hookup cable, or in most scenarios an issue with your campsite. The campsite may have tripped, so just check that. Next up, you've then got a little button here. This is for the lights on the inside of the van, which allows you to turn them on and off rather than just using the switches. And then on this side, you've then got your levels for your fresh water tank, your waste water tank, and also your leisure battery and your vehicle battery. So firstly, the vehicle battery, if I hold this up, you can see that little needle there will flick up. It's a little bit difficult to see because of the glare on the camera, but if I just press that again, you'll notice it goes to pretty much 100%. And that, if I hold up towards the icon at the top, will tell me the vehicle's voltage on the vehicle's battery. For the leisure battery, hold that down, and it'll do the same thing. You can see we're at 100% there because we are plugged into electric, and that is for your leisure battery. Next up and next to that, you can see that you've got your fresh water. So all you've got to do is you've got to press that down. Now, I've not got anything in the fresh water tank at the moment, as it is quite late in the year that I'm filming this video. I've drained everything down, so you can see nothing is reading. But once you've got water in your tank, press that and that will indicate how much water you've got left. And then finally, for your wastewater, just flick this up, and again it will come up just like it did when I pressed the vehicle voltage battery. It will tell you a reading on the needle for your wastewater. Now you'll notice there's two tanks here. It'll tell you the reading for one tank and a second tank. Now the second tank at the time was an option. This vehicle has not got a second wastewater tank, so it won't tell you a reading for that, but it will tell you a reading on the first tank. So just press that up and that will indicate how much wastewater you've got in the tank. Finally as well, if you've got an issue with the control panel, you get a little alarm here. Just alarming that something's gone wrong. Perhaps, say for example, your leisure battery is really low on voltage, you'll get an alarm, and that light will just flash red. Now, turning away from the main control panel, we're going into your kitchen area. Obviously, we've spoken about your lounge area. Now, into the kitchen area, the main thing that you need to know is, of course, priming your system. So when you're on your campsite and you've filled your fresh water up with your food grade hose pipe, and of course make sure that your drain down points at that point are sealed up, you can go to all of your taps, including your shower, and then turn this on and turn it to hot. What that will do is it will pull fresh water from the fresh water tank into the boiler and then out to the tap. And obviously, because it's pulling it through the boiler, like I mentioned, you do need to make sure that you've got that tank sealed, or that the boiler sealed, because if you don't, it'll just end up pulling out on the side of the road. So make sure that that's sealed when it's in use. Now it will spurt and splutter at first, and then when it's running steadily, you've primed your system for your hot water, and like I say, do this on all your taps. Once you've done that, flick it over to cold and do the exact same thing. It will take a little bit longer on the hot water, because as you can imagine, it's pulling fresh water from the freshwater tank all the way through the boiler, and the boiler holds about 10 litres of water, and then out of the system. So it will take quite a bit of time. Just be patient with it, but once it's running steadily on the hot water, you've done it, flick it over to cold. It'll be a bit quicker on the cold, and it'll pull straight through. Now when it's running steadily, you have primed your system for your cold water, and everything is pretty much good to be used. Now one thing I did actually forget to mention is, of course, in order to pull the water through, you'll need to turn your pump on. Now you can leave your pump on once everything's primed through, because in each of your taps you've got something called a micro switch, which will activate and deactivate the pump whenever you need it, a little bit like when you're at home. But of course you don't want to be running the pump when you've no water in the tank, because you'll simply just burn the pump out, so just bear that in mind. But to turn your pump on and off, it's just through this switch, and then when you turn your taps on, that will then activate the pump. So moving on from the sink, you can see that you've got your hobs here, along with draining board there, which is dead handy, and like everything in this van, it's got a really good bit of storage. Now I just wanted to show you underneath here, because you will notice that you've got just under your sink these red valves. These are called isolation valves and will allow you to isolate certain areas of the vehicle. Now in this instance you need to make sure that they're all facing up. If you turn them, that will isolate that certain area. Everything that you need to know is all done on that panel, so don't worry about these, leave these as they are. These are purely and simply for the technicians and whoever's working on the motorhome when checking for gas leaks and etc and things like that. So just leave them as they are. There's no real need for you to play around with them. In the kitchen area as well, you can see we've got your Truma control panel, which is your heating system for the vehicle. So with your control panel on, all you need to do is press the dial in, and then you can see everything below the line is what you want to select. So firstly, you've got your vehicle's temperature. If I click the dial in, you can turn then turn the dial rather, and take it all the way up to 30 degrees should you want to. Next up, you've then got your water temperature, so you can have this on Eco, Hot or Boost. Now Eco is approximately 40 degrees, Hot is approximately 60 degrees, and Boost will concentrate on, rather than heating the vehicle itself, it will concentrate on heating the water. In most cases you'll have it on Hot. Next up, you've then got your fuel selection, so you can run this off gas, Mix 1, Mix 2, EL1 or EL2. So if you're hooked up to a campsite, you'll probably run it off EL2. That stands for 2 kilowatt electric. In some cases, especially when you go abroad, you may be forced to run it off EL1, which is 1 kilowatt electric, due to the amount of power that the campsite provides you. If that is the case, I recommend sticking on Mix 1. That's a mixture of gas and 1 kilowatt electric, or purely gas. Now, if it is really cold and you find that even on 2 kilowatt electric, the van is struggling on to get warm, stick it on Mix 2. That's a combination of gas and electric, 2 kilowatt. And as I say, I've just spoken to you about the Mix 1. If you're wild camping, just run it off gas. And obviously that'll get it up to temperature nice and quickly. If you do want to try and get it up to temperature the quickest, you're not really bothered about what fuel you use, just always run it off gas. It always gets it up to temperature a lot quicker. And perhaps if you're on a campsite, stick it on gas. As soon as it's up to temperature, flick it over back to electric. So next up, you've then got your fan. Now, because I've not got anything selected, it's only giving me the option of vent, which will recirculate the air in the motorhome, which is quite a nice idea, because if it is a hot day, it will just get that air circulation through the motorhome. If you do select one of these, that will then give you the option of Eco or High. Eco will turn the fan on and will begin blowing that air through the motorhome, or High is just a more intensified version of that. Next up, down here you can see that you've got a little timer, so you can actually set a timer of when you want your heating to come on. You've got the clock as well, so you can change the time that's displayed on the unit. And then finally, in here, in your settings, you've got a little reset button. Now, the times that you'll need to reset this panel is if, for example, you'll get an error code, which is displayed on here. Now, you'll tend to get an error code if you've, for example, selected the wrong fuel. So say this is the most typical scenario. If I was to run this off gas right now, try and operate it on gas, because I've not got any gas in the vehicle, all that will happen is I'll get a fault on there, I'll get the error code that'll come up, and I'll need to reset the panel, because basically the boiler is trying to power and fuel itself with something that it's not got. So you need to always ensure that you select the correct fuel, because if not, you will be met with an error code. Now, if you get an error code, it's not the end of the world. As I mentioned, go into that settings panel, flick it all the way over to reset, click reset, it may say preset, click that again, and then the screen will begin to reset. Now, it'll flicker, it'll say initializing, and then it'll come back on after about 20 to 30 seconds. Now, it'll appear that the screen is then back you know, to normal and you can use it. However, that's not the case. You do need to wait a full 20 minutes for this system to completely reset. So obviously it's a bit of a pain if this happens, so try and get in the habit of selecting the right fuel to begin with. Now, to turn this off, all you need to do is hold the button in, and eventually it will say off, just like that, and then the panel is off, and then you're good to go. So when you're not using the vehicle or you're packing up to go away, turn that off before removing the fuel, because for example, if I was running this off electric now, and before turning this off I remove the electric cable, all that will happen is I'll get an error code on there. So that means next time I come to use it, I'll have to reset it, which is just, again, a bit of a pain. So always turn that off before you remove the fuel from obviously the vehicle, so either that being gas or electric. Another tip as well, what I'd recommend is when you're on site, you're filled up with water and you've primed your system, as I've discussed, turn your heating on for your water. That will just ensure that boiler can get up to temperature. It's going to take about 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, depending on what fuel and also the temperature. So make sure that you turn that on as soon as you're in the van and you've got everything primed through. Because, as I say, it just means once you've got everything sorted in the van, after about 30 to 40 minutes, that water will be nice and warm, so you can use it. Of course, it's not instant hot water. It does require a bit of time to heat up, so just bear that in mind. Now, behind the control panel, you can see that you've got a really good bit of hanging space in here, and you've also got your RCD breakers back here. It's a little bit difficult to see because of the lighting, but you can see if the vehicle ever trips, you can just simply come to this point. Nice and accessible. And then underneath there, again, it's a little bit difficult to see on the video, apologies for this, but you've got your boiler, which is just located underneath this flap here. Now, you've got two entrance points that you'll need to use when draining down the boiler, because this boiler has been fitted with a frost protection drain down valve, which is a really, really good system. So you've got to access it around the top here, but also through this cupboard here. So you can see with this cupboard open, I've just removed this shelf here, and in here this will then gain you access to the drain down point. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult to film, so if you do want me to show you one handover, that's not a problem, so just let us know, but I will do my best to show you how this can work on the video. Okie dokie, so coming into where the boiler is, you can see that just below there you've got a little diamond shaped piece of plastic on the top of another black piece of plastic. This is the drain down point that I'm referring to. To seal the unit, you need to ensure that the diamond is facing the other way, so it's facing across the van rather than towards the bathroom. It's facing the back of the wall. And then you've got a blue button which you can access on the other side, which I'll show you shortly, which will completely seal it. So you can see, just like that, that blue diamond is now turned and is facing away from the kitchen area and towards the back of the van. And then to seal it, all you need to do, you'll notice that you've got this little blue button here on the side of the unit. Press that in until it's flush, and then you can see that that system is now completely sealed. Once you've done that, you're good to use your boiler. You have got two additional drain down points which are located underneath this slat here, as you can see. Again, if I just get the torch out, you can see these two little yellow valves. They are designed to drain everything from the boiler beyond, so basically to your taps. Now, in the up position as they are now, they are closed. They are open. and in the down position they are closed and they are sealed. So if you want to use it, flick them down, obviously turn that diamond across and press that blue button in, and that will mean that everything can flow through the vehicle, and then you're good to go. To drain it down, flick them up, and then for this all you've got to do is turn the diamond on the top. As I say, the diamond is just located here, so just turn that back so it faces the kitchen area. And as you can see, that diamond is now facing back to the kitchen, and by turning that, what that has meant is that blue button on the side has pinged out, and that will drain it. Now I've just flicked them switches back up and left the drain down point open, as I say, because it is quite a cool day today. We don't want anything freezing, so when you stop using it, as I say, turn that diamond so it's facing back towards the kitchen, flick them yellow toggles up, and then everything will drain down. And just like that, I've just popped the storage locker back into position, and then you're good to use the vehicle. And before I move on from that drain down point, one thing I just wanted to point out and just make you aware is, because this is a frost protection valve, it reacts to temperature, and it's actually designed as a fail-safe unit. So for example, if you forget for whatever reason to drain that boiler down, the solution in that black box that you've seen with the diamond on the top will react to temperature. So if it gets below a certain temperature, that will automatically trip and drain itself. So it's a really good fail-safe if you obviously forget. Having said that, what can happen, it doesn't happen often, but if you've not used the vehicle in a while, or you're using the vehicle in really cool conditions, when you go to seal that and you press that blue button in on the side, as I showed you down here in this cupboard, the blue button won't sit in flush, it'll keep pinging out. And the reason for that, as I mentioned, is there's some solution in there that reacts to the temperature. So it's not sealing the unit in fear that it's too cold and it's going to freeze. If that happens to you and you're wanting to use the motorhome, all you'll need to do is go to your control panel, turn your heating on, not your water heating, but the vehicle heating, and after about 30 minutes that will get that area nice and warm, and then you'll be able to shut that unit and get all the water pulled through the system. Now, as I say, it very rarely happens. It's really only if you're using the vehicle in extremely cold conditions, but it's one thing to be aware of. Opposite the kitchen, you can see that you've got your freezer and your fridge down here. For your freezer, I'd recommend putting frozen things in there, and for your fridge, just put cold things in there, because the fridge will do a really good job at maintaining the temperature. It can struggle at times to get them down to the temperature, so just bear that in mind. Now, to control this, all you've got to do is press this button, and you can see that will turn the fridge on for you. Now, to be fair, this fridge was ahead of its time, because it's a three-way system, so there's 3 ways to actually fuel the fridge depending on how you're using the motorhome. To fuel the fridge, or to select between the options, you can flick manually through them, or if you leave it on this option here, this first option, that will automatically assign whichever fuel you've got to fuel the fridge. It's really clever. But just to talk you through the 3 options, you can either run this off 12 volt, your gas, or 230 volt electric, which currently I'm running it off because obviously I'm connected up. Now, a lot of people think that they can run these fridges off the 12 volt leisure battery when they're wild camping. However, that is not the case. You can only run the fridge off your gas, because if this was to run just purely off 12 volts, it'll just leave you with no power. So you can only run the fridge off your 12 volt leisure battery when your ignition is on, because when your ignition's on, you've got something called an alternator which is fitted to this motorhome, which, as the engine battery is running, it will send power through the alternator to your leisure battery, which can then power the fridge. So it'll only allow you to run the 12 volt for when you're travelling, and when you're stationary, you need to run it off gas. And as I say, to flick through the options, you can select this button that will flick through each little icon. But if I were you, I'd just leave it on this. As I say, that will automatically assign whichever fuel you've got. And in this instance, it's selecting 230 volt for me. Finally, you can change the temperature of the fridge as well, should you want to. In most situations, you'll just have this on max. To turn this off, hold this button, and you can see just like that, it turns the fridge off. Now, directly above the fridge, you can see that you've got a microwave. As I mentioned on the outside, this will only work when you've got 230 volt electric supplied through to the vehicle. The same again goes for your 230 volt appliances, and of course your sockets which are plugging into them. So just bear that in mind. Moving to the rear of the motorhome, you can see that you've got your French bed here. And as I mentioned on the outside, this bed does lift up, giving you access into your garage area, which is a really good area. It's fully heated and insulated in here, so if you're putting anything damp, it will heat it. You've got your carpets back here. You've actually also got some spare fridge vents, which, as I mentioned, can be used for when you're storing the vehicle. And the previous owner has built a little worktop, so you can store a couple more things in there whilst having the capacity to take a spare wheel. And as I say, it is heated. You can see that you've got your pipe in here which will blow air around the entire area. Moving to the other side, you can see that you've got your bathroom area. So we've spoken about priming your system for your shower and also your taps. The thing I need to tell you about is obviously how to use the toilet. Now, I kept on talking about something called a blade on the toilet. The blade, I don't know whether you can see this, is actually that piece of plastic there. So you can see that grey piece of plastic controls the blade. Now at the moment it is closed. All you've got to do, if I just swivel the cassette around, if I pull that and slide it towards me, that will then open the cassette. With the cassette open, that will allow all the waste to drop into the cassette. And once you've done that, you can click the blue button on the top of the toilet. That will activate your flush, and that will flush everything into the cassette toilet. Once you've done that, push that blade back, and that will close the cassette. Now, you close the cassette for obviously two reasons. The main reason being is it stops any odours from escaping, but two, it gets you into the habit of having that closed, so every time you come to remove the cassette, you don't have that issue of it getting jammed. Keep that closed and then you're good to go. One thing to bear in mind as well is, in order for this to flush correctly, you will need your pump on, of course, for that to operate. Before moving on from the bathroom as well, I just wanted to point out on all your windows around the motorhome, you've got blackout blinds and you've got fly screens as well. And to open these windows, all you need to do is press this red latch in, slide the window like so. That will then allow you to push the window out. These are on little clickers, you might be able to hear them. They will then hold the window in place. To take it back, push it all the way up, let that slide back into position, line the handle back up. You can then twist the handle by pressing the red button in and locking that window into position. Now, when you're travelling, please ensure that all your windows are of course closed. Same goes for your skylights, which are dotted around the motorhome. You don't want to be travelling with any skylight open, because if you get any bit of wind underneath there, it would just simply tear the awning. Speaking of the awning now, the window away from the vehicle. So just bear that in mind. And just like that, that concludes the handover video on this Hymer T-class 655. I hope you enjoyed it.